Moon Palace, Chapter 2. Yuan and his mother's flight to China was on a Sunday morning. Lao Tang, the chef, volunteered to take them to the airport. While Yuan was waiting for his ride, he was in the bathroom shaving with his electric razor, and a noise woke Mei Ling up. She squinted her eyes and lifted up her head to see what her husband was doing. She glanced at him for a few seconds and laid back down. She did not feel like getting up, despite how annoying the noises were. She tried to go back to sleep by turning to her side, grabbing Yuan's pillow and covering her ears with it. But it was not working. Instead, she began to feel anxious. She took the pillow off the side of her face and held it in front of her chest, trying to keep herself occupied. She started to listen to her husband's every move, from shaving to showering to opening and closing their drawers. She was startled when he sat down on the edge of their bed. But even then, her eyes remained closed. Nothing he was doing would get her to open her eyes. But the moment she heard him zip up his luggage, her eyes opened, and her heart began to pound. Her forehead began to sweat, and her eyelids started to twitch, all in a split second. Then suddenly, through the corner of her eye, she saw her husband approaching, and she instinctively turned away from him. She was still mad at him, especially about last night's bickering. It was around 11:30 at night. Yuan and Mei Ling were on their way home from work. "I just don't understand. Why can't your aunt go with her?" Mei Ling asked. "You've never left the restaurant for more than 3 days." Yuan glanced at Mei Ling and tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. "Mei Ling, we've been through this. My mother wanted only me to take her. You know how she can say things to make me feel guilty, so I have to say yes." "You mean the kind of guilt you feel about our marriage?" "What are you talking about? I don't feel guilty about our marriage." "Yes, you do, and that's why you agreed to take her." Yuan took a long puff of his cigarette, rolled down his window, and threw the cigarette butt out. As the smoke passed through his nostrils, he sighed. He laid his hand over her lap. "Let's just get through this, okay? If my father was still around, things could have been different. He could have taken her." Mei Ling glared at him and folded her arms in front of her chest. "You know, just because we have no children, Moon Palace is like a child to me and you." "I know that. You don't think I know that?" "I just wanted to make sure, because I work just as hard as you, and sometimes I don't feel like I am appreciated." "What are you getting at, Mei Ling?" "I'm not sure." Mei Ling looked out the window. "I just don't want you to go." Yuan continued to tap his fingers on the wheel and started to grind his teeth. Maybe, if he did not respond, the conversation would be over. He was wrong. His silence only infuriated her. "Aren't you going to say anything?" Mei Ling asked impatiently. Yuan took another deep breath. "What do you want me to say?" Yuan's voice softened. "You really don't need to worry. Lao Tao will make sure the kitchen runs smoothly. And when the new guy that I just hired, everything will be all right. All you have to do is keep doing what you have been doing. So don't worry." Thinking that her husband failed to acknowledge her feelings, she did not speak to him for the rest of the night. For a few seconds, Yuan looked at his wife back, hoping that she would turn around to say goodbye. She didn't. He sighed, and thought whatever needed to say last night was said. Let her go back to sleep. He bent over and kissed her on the head and went downstairs with his luggage. Moments later, a car honked in front of their driveway. and then the front door opened and closed. Mei Ling lifted her head up. He's gone. She wanted to get up to look out the window, to catch the last glimpse of him. It's too late, she thought. Laotan's car was probably out of sight by now. Mei Ling's eyes started to burn. She flipped the cover over her head and tried to hold back her tears. She stared at the translucent light through her white comforter and thought, if only things were as simple as this. After another hour of tossing and turning, she began to feel anxious again. She thought about the business and how the staff, especially Laotan, would do without Yuan. Would Laotan handle the kitchen as he normally did? Would Pang and Shuming handle the dining room as they normally did? Yuan said he hired a new guy. Would Laotan accept the new guy without getting upset? Who was this new guy anyway? What was his name? What references did he have? There were so many questions floating in Mei Ling's mind that her temples began to pulsate. She felt as if her head was in a vice, squeezed by a clamp. She rubbed both of her temples in a circular motion and forced herself to get up and take a shower. The warm water felt good against her back and her headache began to subside. She picked up a towel that was hanging next to the shower curtain and dried herself. She wiped the fog off the mirror in front of the sink and took a close look at her face, which was pale as chalk. Her eyes were bloodshot and had dark rings underneath them. She looked as if she did not sleep for days. At least she hasn't slept her usual 6 hours ever since the news. She heard her husband's voice in her head, repeating over and over, "Don't worry, don't worry. Everything will be fine." No, everything will not be fine. Especially with Laotan. To her, there was no way of telling how Laotan was going to behave in front of her, and how she would be able to handle him. There were times when Yuan went out on an errand for a few hours, and Laotan would command her to get things for him. And then there were other times when the restaurant was so busy that the orders were piling up. Yuan was not around to help, and Laotan would get angry. He would throw his spatula and ladle into the wok and stormed out. Both Mei Ling and the girls knew how important Laotan was to the restaurant. They never told Yuan what happened. How ironic, she thought, even though the guy worked for her, she was intimidated by him. While her dilemma spinning inside of her, she put on her makeup, got dressed, and concluded that there was no right answer. I might as well just keep my chin up and deal with it when it happens. She looked at herself in the mirror. Unlike her usual one-piece dress, she wore a gray suit with a pencil skirt. She wanted to look professional. She really wanted to look and hopefully feel confident. She checked her face in the mirror again. The makeup seemed to help covering her gloominess. She looked at the clock. It was time to go.